They stripped him of weapons, boots, and dignity, then dropped him laughing onto a planet where even the rocks hunted back. The sky above Warworld Khepri boiled like a bruise, violet clouds churning with static that cracked without thunder, and the audience stands carved into distant basalt ridges pulsed with bioluminescent sigils announcing the next entertainment cycle. Lieutenant Aaron Hale landed hard, rolled, tasted iron, and lay still while scanners swept him, ensuring compliance with the rules of the trial: no tools, no allies, no mercy. Somewhere far above, a consortium of alien spectators debated odds and wagers, confident that a human without weapons would last minutes, perhaps seconds, against a biosphere designed to erase intruders. Hale listened to the wind hiss through bone-spined reeds and felt his pulse slow, the old training sliding into place like a familiar coat. He pushed himself up, cataloging injuries with a medic's calm. Bruised ribs, scraped palms, nothing broken yet. The collar at his throat glowed amber, broadcasting his vitals to judges who preferred their prey lively. He smiled despite himself, because the situation was absurd in a way only humans could appreciate. He had been invited to a peace summit, applauded for restraint, then sentenced to a gladiatorial ecology for the crime of surviving too many battles. The irony tasted bitter, but humor kept panic from gaining ground. "Okay," he muttered, voice snatched by the wind. "Tuesday." A shape moved in the reeds, a ripple of spines and wet muscle, and Hale backed toward a cluster of fallen trees whose bark shimmered like chitin. He needed shelter, water, and time. He needed to think. His captors had made a show of confiscating everything down to the laces in his boots, yet they couldn't confiscate habits. He knelt, pressed fingers into the soil, and rubbed it between them, smelling copper and rot. The planet was alive in a way Earth had never been, aggressive and opportunistic, but life followed rules. Predators hunted, prey hid, materials fractured under stress. The rules were different, not absent. The first attack came without ceremony. A dart of bone shot from the reeds, punched through a fallen log, and buried itself inches from his thigh. Hale flinched, rolled, and came up crouched as a creature unfolded itself from concealment, all angles and eyes, a mantis squid hybrid with sides that sang when they cut air. He sprinted, heart hammering, boots non-existent, feet screaming as thorns sliced skin. The audience sigils brightened, anticipating blood. Hale zigzagged, dove under a low branch, and the creature impaled itself, briefly, on bark tough as armor. He didn't wait. He ran until his lungs burned and the world narrowed to the next step, the next breath. He collapsed beside a stream that steamed faintly, water tasting metallic but not immediately lethal. He drank sparingly, knowing toxins could be cumulative, and rinsed cuts that stung like fire. When he looked up, he saw the skeletons first, heaps of pale curves piled where the stream bent, remnants of something enormous and very dead. The bones were dense, layered, etched with micro-fractures that suggested both strength and brittleness. Hale's mind, trained to see tools in chaos, sparked. Bone could be sharpened. Bone could be hafted. Bone could become leverage where muscle failed. The humor bubbled up again, inappropriate and unstoppable. They had dropped him weaponless, yes, but they had dropped him onto a boneyard. He rose, wary, and tested a femur with a rock, striking until a shard sheared away, edges cruel and promising. His hands learned the weight, the balance. He wrapped his palms with fibrous bark to protect skin, tied with sinew peeled from the carcass remains. It was crude, but it was something, and something beat nothing. The collar at his throat flickered amber to green as his vitals steadied, confusing the odds makers. As dusk fell, the planet changed tempo. Nocturnal things clicked awake, eyes opening like stars too close. Hale found a hollow between roots and wedged himself in, shard clutched, breath slow. He thought of the people watching, the ones who believed cruelty was a test of intelligence, and felt a cold resolve settle deeper than fear. He wasn't here to entertain them. He was here because humans endured, adapted, and learned faster than anyone expected. The bones outside gleamed softly in alien starlight, and Hale slept with a plan forming, knowing the morning would demand more than luck. When dawn bled green over the ridges, the arena announced itself with drums grown from living stone, each beat a reminder that survival was spectacle. Hale woke stiff and hungry, catalogued the ache, and moved anyway. He scouted upstream, noting tracks that overlapped and erased each other, learning the rhythms of hunters and grazers. He set simple snares from vine and springy branch, not expecting miracles, just information. The first snare snapped empty, the second held a fist-sized crawler that spat acid until Hale ended it quickly, apologizing out of habit. He roasted the meat over a cautious fire fed by resinous twigs, ate, and felt strength creep back into his limbs. Above, sigils dimmed, bored by patience. Hale smiled again. Patience was a human weapon they never bothered to ban. By mid-morning he had mapped safe paths, marked stones, and named landmarks, turning chaos into a place he could argue with. The shard became a blade with practice, edges honed on stone until it sang softly. He tested swings, footwork, balance, remembering drills from 100 worlds. Somewhere a roar rolled like thunder with teeth, and the audience sigils flared, hungry again. Hale checked his bindings, flexed sore fingers, and faced the sound. The stakes were simple now, adapt or vanish. He stepped forward, human, unarmed by decree, armed by will, ready to make the planet regret underestimating him. He breathed once, twice, and smiled for the cameras he pretended not to see, because surviving had always been humanity's quiet rebellion against impossible rules written by species who forgot stubborn hope endures. The roar returned closer than before, close enough that the ground shivered as if the planet itself were clearing its throat to swallow him. Aaron Hale crouched behind a curtain of blade grass and watched a shadow move across the greenlit plain, enormous and deliberate, each step crushing life into paste. The creature emerged fully a moment later, a quadruped titan plated in overlapping bone shields, its skull crowned with hooked protrusions that dripped a resinous venom onto the soil. The audience sigils flared into fever-bright patterns, wagering spiking as the trial escalated from nuisance predators to extinction-grade spectacle. Hale exhaled slowly, because charging straight at it would be suicidal, and running blindly would only amuse whatever hunted faster than he could think. He retreated along the path he had mapped, feet remembering stones his eyes barely registered, and slipped into a ravine cut sharp and narrow by ancient floods. The titan followed, snorting, tearing chunks from the walls with casual power. Hale climbed, wedged himself into a chimney of rock, and held on while the beast thundered past below, confused rage shaking loose pebbles that pattered down like rain. When it moved on, he dropped, hands shaking not with fear but with adrenaline's aftertaste. The planet was pushing harder. So would he. The snares taught him quickly. By midday, 2 were destroyed by something clever enough to avoid the spring and cruel enough to trigger it anyway. A third held a mid-sized grazer whose scream drew attention Hale didn't want. He ended the animal and dragged the carcass into cover, working fast, fingers slick. As he skinned and harvested sinew, teeth, and dense bone plates, he felt eyes on him, small, many, patient. The watchers weren't the audience this time. They were locals learning a new pattern. He used the grazer's rib as a base, grinding its edge thinner, sharper, then reinforcing it with resin that hardened like ceramic when heated. He split a femur to create a longer blade, heavier, capable of leverage. It wasn't elegant, but elegance was a luxury. He tested the weight, adjusted bindings, and smiled at the ugly effectiveness of it. The collar at his throat flickered again as the judges recalculated. Their rules hadn't included manufacturing. The first complication arrived in the form of rain. It fell upward, droplets lifting from the ground and streaking into the sky, stripping oils from skin and leaving behind a chill that bit deep. Hale cursed, covered his blade, and moved, because standing still meant hypothermia and something with too many legs would notice. He found shelter under a stone shelf veined with heat, the planet bleeding warmth and slow pulses. There he waited, ate sparingly, and watched the ecology adjust to the inverted storm. When the rain reversed and slammed down in a sudden deluge, he was already gone. The watchers made their move at dusk. 3 of them, lean and jointed, flanked him with a coordination that spoke of pack intelligence. Hale backed toward a fallen pillar, raised his blade, and let them see it. They hesitated, clicking, recalculating risk. He lunged, not to kill, but to wound, scoring one's flank and retreating before the others closed. blood hissed on the soil. The pack screamed, rage overriding caution, and Hale used that, leading them into the ravine where footing betrayed speed. One fell, neck snapping. Another lost a limb to his blade and fled. The last circled, slower now, smarter. Hale waited, then ended it cleanly. He stood shaking, breath ragged, and laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. The audience sigils dimmed, confused by efficiency. Night brought a new rule. The stars shifted, rearranging themselves into patterns that tugged at the mind, inducing vertigo and false horizons. Hale tied a strip of cloth across his eyes, leaving slits, grounding himself in the familiar rhythm of breath and step. He navigated by touch, by memory, by stubborn refusal to let the planet rewrite him. When something brushed his leg, he kicked, felt cartilage give, and moved on without looking back. By the third day, hunger gnawed again, deeper this time, and water tasted worse. Hale improvised a filter from layered fibers and bone charcoal, reducing the sting enough to drink. He found a grove of bulbous plants that exploded into spores when touched and learned to harvest them by triggering detonations from a distance, then collecting the nutritious cores left behind. Each solution bought time. Each solution taught him more. The Titan returned at dawn, tracking him with patient inevitability. Hale didn't run. He led it to the boneyard by the steaming stream, where the skeletons lay like accusations. He wedged sharpened stakes into the mud, angled to pierce softer joints, baited the path with offal, and climbed. When the Titan charged, earth shook, stakes snapped, but two held, driving deep. The beast roared, thrashed, and Hale dropped onto its back, blade biting between plates, muscles screaming as he leveraged bone against bone. It took everything he had. When it finally fell, the silence was immense. Hale stood over the carcass as the audience sigils went dark, recalibrating the definition of fair. He was bleeding, exhausted, alive. He harvested again, upgrading his blade with the Titan's densest armor, shaping something closer to a sword. The conflict was no longer survival versus environment. It was intention versus expectation. And Hale intended to keep rewriting the rules until the trial broke first. The sky cracked open like a wound the moment Aaron Hale finished binding the Titan's bone to his blade, and every instinct he had screamed that the trial had decided to stop pretending. The arena drums did not sound this time. Instead, the planet itself responded, the ground pulsing in slow, deliberate waves as if Warworld Khepri were drawing a breath deep enough to drown continents. The audience sigils reignited across the distant ridges, brighter than ever, not with excitement but with anticipation sharpened into something like fear. Hale felt it through the collar at his throat as it warmed, recalibrating his odds downward in a way that suggested the judges had authorized a correction. He tested his new sword, the edge whispering as it cut air, heavier now, balanced by instinct rather than design. Titan bone did not behave like steel. It flexed just enough to absorb shock, stored force like a coiled muscle. He could feel the weapon wanting to move, an extension of will more than arm. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's see what you've been saving." The first sign was silence. The clicking, churring, and distant roars that defined Khepri's nights fell away until the absence rang in his ears. Predators hid. Grazers fled. Even the wind stilled, pinned by something vast approaching with no need for stealth. Hale climbed the basalt rise overlooking the boneyard, knowing high ground was temporary comfort at best. He needed to see it coming. What emerged from the far haze made the Titan he had killed look like a practiced dummy. It walked on 6 limbs, each joint armored, its central mass suspended like a fortress of bone and muscle. Where a head should have been there was a crown of sensory stalks, fanning, tasting, reading the world. Old scars webbed its plating, proof that this thing had been killing challengers long before humans learned to throw stones. This was not a predator. This was a solution the planet deployed when problems persisted. The collar at Hale's throat flared red, broadcasting a warning he didn't need translated. Termination class entity engaged. The judges had stopped betting. They were watching history correct itself. Hale descended into the boneyard and waited. The ground shook as the creature entered the killing field, crushing skeletons into powder with contemptuous ease. Hale sprinted, drawing it deeper, past the stake shattered earlier, toward the narrow bend by the steaming stream. The creature adapted instantly, sensory stalks swiveling, limbs reconfiguring to distribute weight. It did not charge. It advanced, patient, inevitable. When it struck, it was with soundless speed. A limb snapped out, faster than Hale's eye could track, slamming him into a rib pile hard enough to steal breath. He rolled, barely bringing his blade up in time to deflect a second blow that sent shock through his arms and into his teeth. Bone rang against bone. Hale spat blood, laughed once because panic would kill him faster than anything else, and ran again. He led it through every trap he had prepared. Acid pools erupted, stakes pierced, resin ignited, but the creature absorbed damage, adjusted, learned. Hale scored shallow cuts, drawing ichor that steamed and smoked, but nothing slowed it for long. Each exchange taught him a little more about its rhythm, its reach, the moments when armor separated just enough to risk a strike. He needed one opening. Just one. The opening came when the planet betrayed its own champion. The inverted rain returned without warning, droplets ripping upward from the stream and the creature's own wounds, tugging at mass, distorting balance. The six-limbed titan faltered for the first time, limbs scrabbling as gravity argued with itself. Hale did not hesitate. He charged straight at it, sliding under a sweeping limb, driving his sword up into the softer tissue beneath the central mass. The blade sank deep. The creature screamed, a sound felt more than heard, and lashed out blindly. Hale was thrown clear, hit the ground hard, and felt something tear in his shoulder. He forced himself up anyway as the creature staggered, ichor pouring, sensory stalks thrashing in confusion. It adapted again, slamming limbs into the ground to anchor itself against the rain, turning back toward him with murderous focus. "You're not wrong," Hale gasped, bracing himself. "I shouldn't be here." He ran at it anyway. This time he climbed, leaping onto its flank, hauling himself upward hand over hand as it bucked and slammed itself against stone. He lost skin, blood slicking his grip, but he found purchase in old scars and embedded debris, reminders of past survivors who had almost mattered. When he reached the crown of stalks, the creature reared, trying to crush him against its own armor. Hale jammed his blade between plates, twisted, and drove it down through the cluster. The scream cut off mid-note. The creature convulsed, limbs flailing as control collapsed into reflex. Hale held on until the spasms slowed, then jumped clear as it crashed into the boneyard, shaking the world one final time before going still. Silence returned, deeper than before. Hale lay on his back, staring at a sky that had stopped trying to kill him for the moment. His chest heaved. His hands shook. He laughed, then coughed, then laughed again because the sound meant he was still breathing. Slowly he stood, leaning on his sword as the audience sigils flickered uncertainly, struggling to categorize what had just happened. He was bleeding. He was broken in places that would hurt tomorrow. But he was alive, standing over something that had ended countless trials. The climactic challenge lay dead at his feet, slain not by superior technology or numbers, but by a stubborn refusal to accept the script written for him. Far above, the judges began to argue, voices sharp with unease. Hale wiped his blade clean on titan bone and looked up at the watching lights, eyes hard, smile thin. The trial had reached its peak, and instead of ending him, it had revealed a problem it could no longer solve easily. Humanity had adapted again. The sky did not applaud, but something close to uncertainty rippled through it as the lights above faltered, dimmed, and rearranged themselves into cautious formations. Aaron Hale stood alone in the boneyard, leaning on a sword grown from the planet's own dead, while Warworld Khepri hesitated for the first time since it had learned how to kill. The silence stretched, thick and expectant, broken only by the hiss of cooling ichor and Hale's uneven breathing. He knew better than to assume it was over. Trials like this never ended cleanly. They ended when someone decided the lesson had been learned, or when the subject stopped moving. The collar at his throat warmed, then cooled, cycling through colors that meant frantic recalculation. Voices filtered through at last, translated into harsh, precise tones that tried very hard to sound calm. The judges were debating protocol, legality, precedent. Hale listened with half an ear, attention focused instead on his own body. Torn shoulder. Cracked ribs. Deep fatigue that settled into bones and made standing feel optional. He stayed upright anyway. A pure week later, his old sergeant's voice reminded him. Never during negotiations. Human. The voice finally addressed him directly, layered and artificial. The trial parameters have been exceeded. You have demonstrated anomalous persistence. Hale snorted, then winced at the pain. You dropped me naked on a murder planet, he said. I demonstrated being alive. A pause followed, longer this time. The audience sigils brightened cautiously, curiosity outweighing disappointment. Hale could almost feel them leaning forward, this strange creature who had turned their entertainment into an argument. The judges resumed, sharper now, the translation lagging behind emotion. Continuation of the trial risks unacceptable loss of assets, the voice said. Termination has failed. Extraction is under consideration. Hale tightened his grip on the sword. Extraction sounds nice, he said. But I've got a counteroffer. The lights shifted again. State it. You wanted to know how humans survive, Hale said, gesturing with the blade toward the carcass of the termination class entity. How we adapt without tools, without advantages. You've got your data. Now you stop throwing people down here. End the trials. Or next time, we won't come alone. The audience erupted into noise, bioluminescence flaring in agitated patterns. The judges argued loudly now, some voices furious, others calculating. Hale waited, breathing through pain, letting them exhaust themselves. He knew how this went. Bullies hated losing control more than losing lives. The planet helped him again, subtly this time. The ground trembled, a reminder of what happened when Khepri deployed its final answer and still failed. Hale didn't need to threaten. The evidence was literally piled around him. At last, the voice returned, stripped of its earlier confidence. Your species was classified as moderately resilient. This classification will be revised. Good, Hale said. While you're revising things, revise the part where you think survival equals consent. Another pause. Longer still. Then, the trial will be suspended pending review. You will be extracted. A beam of light lanced down from the sky, enveloping Hale in a column of humming force. He staggered as gravity shifted, the ground dropping away, the smells of blood and alien soil replaced by sterile air and ozone. The sword remained in his hand. The beam tried to disintegrate it, failed, and adjusted. Hale smiled despite himself. He materialized on a cold, metallic platform surrounded by beings who suddenly found the human very interesting at a distance. Medical drones swarmed him. Guards raised weapons, then hesitated when the sword hummed softly in response. Hale let them fuss, let the pain finally catch up, sinking to one knee as the adrenaline ebbed. He did not let go of the blade. You may surrender the weapon, the voice said, closer now, embodied in a tall, many-limbed figure whose plating gleamed with authority. Hale looked up at it, eyes tired but sharp. No, he said simply. The figure studied him, then the sword, then the data scrolling across its internal displays. Slowly, deliberately it inclined its head. The artifact will be catalogued as a product of the trial, it said. It is yours. That surprised Hale more than the extraction had. He laughed quietly, a sound halfway to disbelief. See? He said. We can learn. They patched him up as best they could without understanding human anatomy particularly well. While they worked, Hale talked. Not angrily. Not threateningly. He told them about Earth, about environments that tried to kill you in quieter ways, about ancestors who learned to make fire from nothing and tools from whatever didn't kill them first. He told them survival wasn't entertainment to humans. It was history, memory, inheritance. Some of the judges listened. Others pretended not to. All of them recorded everything. When they finally released him to a recovery chamber, Hale lay back and stared at a ceiling that did not bleed or roar. The sword rested beside him, cleaned, repaired, still faintly warm, a reminder carved from alien bone and human stubbornness. He thought about the people who had gone into the trials before him and never come out. He thought about the planet, still down there, waiting. He slept. Days later, time blurred by painkillers and argument, he was escorted to a viewing chamber overlooking Warworld Khepri. The trials were gone. The audience stands dark. The sigils dismantled. The planet still hostile, still alive, but no longer fed challengers for sport. Hale didn't believe it was because of kindness. It was because the system had learned risk. The authority figure stood beside him. "Your survival has altered policy," it said. "This outcome was not predicted." Hale shrugged carefully. "We get that a lot." As the transport prepared to return him to human space, Hale secured the sword in a containment sheath that barely fit it. The guards watched warily but did not interfere. When the hatch closed and the stars stretched into motion, Hale finally allowed himself to rest. He had arrived weaponless on a war world and left carrying proof that humanity did not need permission to endure. The universe would remember the data, the judges would remember the disruption, and somewhere down there, a planet would remember the day it tried to kill a human and failed. Hale closed his eyes, smiling faintly, because for once the lesson was simple: adapt, survive, and if necessary, carve victory from the bones of impossible expectations.